So I came across this story last week and I said, yo, I got to talk about this on RBN. And so let me show you guys. This is out of the Wall Street Journal. I know we don't really pay that much attention to this, but this is deeply important. Out of the Wall Street Journal, it says America is wrapped in miles of toxic lead cables. Let me see, can I enlarge this just a little bit and then move that over? Let's do it one more time. One more time, baby. Let's do it one more time. We want this to be as big as, whoop, whoop. Nope, that's not what we wanted. We want it to just, there we go. And let's just go back up. All right. So as America is wrapped in miles of toxic lead cables, it says telecom companies laid them decades ago and thousands were left behind, posing a hidden health hazard today. So this is an investigation by the Wall Street Journal. This came out last week. Okay. AT&T, Verizon, and other telecom giants have left behind a sprawling network of cables covered in toxic lead that stretches across the United States under the water, in the soil, and on poles overhead. As the lead degrades, it is ending up in places where Americans live, work, and play. It says the lead can be found in the banks of the Mississippi River in Louisiana, the Detroit River in Michigan. Shout out to Rome, he's in Detroit. The Willamette River in Oregon, and the Passaic River in New Jersey, according to Journal's test of samples of nearly 130 underwater cable sites conducted by several independent laboratories. The metal has tainted the soil at a popular fishing spot in New Iberia, Louisiana, at a playground in Wappingers, sorry, Wappingers Falls, New York, and in front of a school in suburban New Jersey. These words, I'm terrible with them. The U.S. has spent decades eradicating well-known sources such as paint, gasoline, and pipes. So, we have lead paint, lead gasoline, lead pipes, unless you're in places like Flint, Michigan. The journal's investigation reveals a hidden source of contamination, more than 2,000 lead-covered cables that hasn't been addressed by the companies or environmental regulators. These relics of the old Bell system, remember Bell South, Bell Atlantic, so Bell system, regional telephone network, and their impact on the environment haven't been previously reported. Lead levels in sediment and soil at more than 4 dozen locations tested by Journal exceeded safety recommendations set by the United States. The EPA at recommendations by the U.S. EPA. At the New Iberia fishing spot, lead leaching into the sediment near cable in June of 2022 measured 14.5 times the EPA threshold for areas where children play. Quote, "We have been fishing here since we were kids," said Taryn Jones, who grew up a few blocks away. For many years, telecom companies have known about the lead-covered cables and the potential risks of exposure to their workers. Of course. According to documents and interviews with former employees, they were also aware that lead was potentially leaching into the environment, but haven't meaningfully acted on potential health risks to the surrounding communities or made efforts to monitor the cables. This says cable locations. It says cable locations in Pennsylvania, underwater and aerial cables, and where the schools are. So you see all these little dots. All these little dots are schools. And then the light blue dots are aerial cable and underwater cable. Look at that. Crazy. Lead in a coal center Pennsylvania sediment cable was 7 times the EPA recommended threshold for children's play areas. So that little light colored white box is the EPA guideline. All the tan colored boxes are what's actually in it. So the EPA guideline is just one box, and this is how much is in it: 7.5 times. Now, it says doctors say that no amount of contact with lead is safe. I'm going to repeat this line. It says doctors say no amount of contact with lead is safe, whether ingested or inhaled, particularly for children's physical and mental development. So I'm going to be showing a video about the effects of lead in humans, particularly children. It says even without further exposure, lead can stay in the blood for about 2 or 3 months and can be stored in bones and organs longer. Risks include behavior and learning problems and damage to the central nervous system in children, as well as kidney, heart, reproductive problems in adults, according to U.S. health agencies. So this is how bad lead in our soil and in our water has the potential to do these damaging things to us when ingested. Now, this is what AT&T, Verizon, and other telecom companies say. It says in response to the journal's reporting, AT&T and Verizon and other telecom companies that succeeded Ma Bell said that they don't believe cables in their ownership are a public health hazard or a major contributor to environmental lead, considering the existence of other sources of lead close to people's homes. They said they follow regulatory safety guidelines for workers dealing with lead. My opinion, bullshit. Bullshit. They actually knew about it, but they're saying this to save their ass, saying, we don't believe there's any risk. Well, yeah, of course they're going to say that because they're trying to cover their ass. And the thing is that that's what these corporations do. Because ultimately, it will cost money to replace these cables, which is something that they don't want to do. Capitalism is a system where the owners of the means of production will try to not spend any money at all and try to make as much profit as possible. So what will happen? This will cut into the profits by replacing these cables with something that's more environmentally safe. And so they don't want to do that. So they rather risk your health, your well-being of you and your children in order to keep the money in their pockets. In fact, this reminds me. This is a result of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And let's see what that is. Because a lot of people don't realize that this deregulation screwed us over. So it says Telecommunications Act led to media mergers. Another consequence of the Telecommunications Act was a flurry of media mergers. The act significantly reduced regulations on media concentration across cross-ownership media outlets. This 3D regulation led to less competition and allowed companies such as AOL, Time Warner, and Viacom to purchase multiple media outlets in local markets. This also has a effect on telecommunications with like AT&T and Verizon. So what happens is they now don't have as much regulation on them, so they're able to not be as safe when it comes to how they operate. And so instead of having what I would prefer, a community owned or federally owned telecommunications apparatus, because the real problem is that they will do anything to keep profit coming to them. It's profit first, people next to never, for the most part. And some people will go, well, Jaybe, you actually want the government to be over your telecommunications. The thing is that if the government was actually ran by us instead of corporations, then yes. The problem is that the government is ran by corporations. When you have a government that's run by the people, by the workers, then that's different. See, when people complain about the government, people complain about the government as it exists now, instead of what we want it to exist as. You see, your problems with the government is primarily because they obey the corporate dictators. That's why you have an issue with government. Government is like a tool. It's like government is like a knife. Depending on who you give that knife to, it could either be something bad for you, or it could be something useful for you. So let's say government is a knife. If I give that knife to a serial killer, guess what? But if I give that knife to a chef, oh, guess what? Oh, it's mealtime, right? So it depends on who what the tool. A tool can be a weapon depending on the hands of the person that it's in. Government in the hands of corporations means that they are destroying us all for the sake of profit. Government in the hands of the workers means that we're going to make sure it benefits us, which means everybody benefits. So this is why when I say nationalization of our telecommunications, nationalization of our government, because our government is not even nationalized anymore. It's privatized. But nationalization of our healthcare industry, nationalization of our utilities, nationalization of our telecommunications. That's what I mean with it being ran by us, not corporations. That's what I mean. And when people talk, especially when socialists and communists talking about government control, it means government control by means of a dictatorship of the proletariat or workers. That's what it means. That means some suit that live in Calabasas, or a suit that lives or vacations out there in the Hamptons, will not have more power than you. In fact, they're going to have one vote just like you and I do. They're not going to be able to influence our government through money. That's what we mean. So just in case anybody's watching, they go, oh my God, government control. The thing is that government in itself isn't bad. It's who controls the government. That's what matters. So let's continue. Before I move on. As companies and an industry group representing them said they would work together to address any concerns related to lead sheath cables. Quote, the U.S. telecommunications industry stands ready to engage constructively on this issue. So this is from a spokeswoman from U.S. Telecom, a broadband association that represents companies in the industry. So, of course, they're going to say the health and safety of the well-being of our people, our customers, and our communities is paramount of importance. That's what AT&T said, which is complete and utter bullshit because they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. So that's who's going to come first. They actually will put their shareholders first instead of the people who are stakeholders within the areas. Verizon says something a little bit better, but it's whatever. It says the lead cover cable network includes more than 1,750 underwater cables. According to public records collected by the journal, a journal analysis of 5 most densely populated states and more than a dozen of the most densely populated counties in the nation identified about 250 aerial cables alongside streets and fields next to schools and bus stops, some drooping under the weight. There are likely far more throughout the country. Just to let you guys know, somebody may be asking, well, why is an aerial cable up in the air any type of danger to any of us? Because, I mean, if it's in the soil, I can see how that's bad. If it's in the water, I definitely can see how that's bad. But why an aerial cable? How can that be bad? Guess what? Precipitation, rain, snow, sleet. So it can get on there and then fall and then saturate the ground. Or it can saturate on those lines and then fall on top of us, or fall on top of things we may have. And we may pick that up by touching it. And so therefore, this is one of the reasons why it is important that we get rid of these lead cable lines also that are in the air as well, because they are subject to the elements. This is why it's also bad to have these things there as well. So these corporations, they had it and they aren't bothering to change it. So let's see how extensively bad this really is across the country. As the journal reporters visited about 300 cable sites around the U.S. and collected roughly 200 environmental samples at nearly 130 of those sites. The samples were analyzed for lead content by Pace Analytical Services, an accredited environmental testing lab. A researcher at the University of Washington who analyzed the chemical fingerprint of lead at some of those sites verified that the lead contaminating the water and soil likely originated from the cable. As among the findings, roughly 330 of the total number of underwater locations identified by the journal are in a source water protection area designated by the federal regulators as contributing to the drinking water supply, according to an EPA review performed for the journal. Aerial lead cable runs alongside more than 1,000 schools with about 48,000 students in total. More than 1,000 schools and child care centers sit within half a mile of an underwater lead cable, according to a journal analysis using data from research firm MCH Strategic Data. Just to let you guys think about this, how many of us get our drinking water from these water sources? And then how many kids are drinking from water fountains or washing their hands in this water? And then let's say you wash your hands in this water. It is not missed upon any of us that a child between the ages of 4 to 8 or 9 are going to put their hands in their mouths at least a few times a day. And if they think, oh, my hands are clean because I wash my hands in water, right? Or we still have water fountains in schools, albeit a lot of these water fountains aren't as trusted anymore. So I don't know how many kids are drinking from water fountains. But guess what? I drank out of a hell of a lot of water fountains when I was in school. And these lines have existed for decades, even when I was in school. And so could it be that I have lead in my system from drinking the water at home from the tap, as well as from these water fountains in my school, as well as washing my hands in this water from the tap? What about the showers that we take? How many of us have taken showers and the lead from in the water pours on top of us and absorbs into our skin. We got to talk about these things. And this is why these corporations are dangerous to our health. They're dangerous for you. They're dangerous for me. This is why workers need to own the means of production, not these corporations, not these people at the top. Because we will look out for ourselves before we ever look for profits. Whereas these guys have a fiduciary responsibility to gain profits for their shareholders and for themselves first. This is why this is so important. Because their priority is money. Our priority is us. Our priority is the health and safety of us as well as all of our neighbors around us. So this is why people like us at RBN, we are anti-capitalist. Because we care about our environment and those of us humans and all other sentient beings on this planet. They do not. They don't care about you. So when we talk about things like revolution, it really means it is a self-defense and self-preservation act in order to make sure that we don't die. That's what it is. And the only reason why revolutions become violent is because the state, the corporations and the wealthy use the state in order to combat us from actually changing the system to be more favorable to all rather than just a few. That's how it is. They always throw the first punch. Always. Go to any protest, especially back in 2020 during the George Floyd protests. Who was the one who got violent first? And who stayed violent? I got time. Go ahead. Holla at me. Because that's what it is. They will say, oh my God, they're violent. When in reality, the ones with the badges and guns are the ones that are being violent. Look what happened in Cop City. They literally riddled Tortuguita with bullets for just sitting, crisscross applesauce with their hands up. And then what? They got riddled with bullets just for protesting a building of a militarized cop training facility? I went off on a tangent. But, rest assured that what they're doing, this is violence. I don't care what nobody says. This is violence. Let's continue. In my home state, in New Jersey alone, more than 350 bus stops are next to or beneath aerial lead covered cables. A journal analysis of New Jersey transit data found. By the way, let me ask y'all a question. What class of people uses public transportation most? Let's continue. Roughly 80% of sediment samples taken to underwater cables. Roughly 80% of sediment samples taken next to underwater cables, which the journal tested, showed elevated levels of lead. It isn't known if the level is leaching is consistent. Experts say old cables tend to degrade over time. It's constant. Ben Grubbles, the executive director of an association of state environmental regulators, called the journal's findings disturbing. This is the type of toxic exposure that isn't on the national radar. It needs to be. There needs to there is a need to act and clean it up. I'm not going to want to though. Since American Telephone and Telegraph, aka AT&T, laid nearly all the cables in question between the late 1800s and the 1960s as it built out telephone service across the US. Excuse me. The cables, often contaminating hundreds of bundled copper wires, had a thick jacket of lead for insulation to prevent corrosion and to keep out water. For underwater cables, steel cords sometimes surround the lead for further protection. When technology advanced and companies turned to plastic sheathing and later fiber optics, they often left the old lines in place because it'd be more expensive to take them out. With the breakup of the Bell Systems monopoly in 1984, regional phone companies became independent competitors that consolidated over time, formed the backbone of modern carriers AT&T and Verizon. Tracking the current odors of old cables isn't a simple task after decades of deals, and companies themselves, in many instances, denied their ownership. The journal provides lists of cable locations to major telecom providers, which decline to detail cable locations. So they're not even letting us know the exact location of the cables, even though they either own them or previously owned them. Let's continue. Let's go. So this is just to let me show you guys this first. Um, just in case you guys are in any areas that may come across this, this is just for precautions. It says lead legacy. What can you do? Lead sheath cables are typically whitish gray. Don't touch them. The most likely source of exposure is through ingesting contaminated water or soil. If you suspect that you've been exposed, ask your doctor to test your blood. The CDC offers guidance on health effects, prevention, and testing. If you suspect a cable in your neighborhood is lead, contact your local phone company or your health department. You can also talk to the journal, which continues to report on the topic. So make sure if you see them, stay away. Do not even touch them. So be careful out there, and talk to your kids. Talk to kids. Let them know. All right. So this is a long article. So the known risks. Says AT&T has previously noted the risks from its cables. Underground cable presents real possibilities for overexposure for workers removing them. AT&T said that in a 2010 presentation about employee safety at an industry conference, some older metropolitan areas may still have over 50% lead cable. That's from AT&T themselves. So here's the thing. They know this. That's what's the most egregious thing about it. They know this, and yet they won't do anything about it because they don't want to spend the money to do it. And it's not like you can say, oh, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to boycott AT&T, because how many other phone companies are there out there for you to use? Because we really live in, oligopoly, where it's only just a small few companies, and so you have to go to one of them in order to use them. Like in my area, I only can use internet from two sources. I can either go through AT&T or Spectrum. I don't have another choice. We don't have choices. And so we don't really have choice. What's the point of having it owned by a corporation? You might as well just nationalize the shit. Just nationalize it. And instead of it making profit, the only money you need to pay, it just goes towards maintenance, operational costs, and maybe some money that's saved for emergencies. And that's it. And if everybody's paying into it, then it's not really going to cost that much. Which means that our internet could be fast and cheap and great quality. But no, we can't. Because the job creators, because they make money, they need to create jobs. When in reality, we, the consumers, we, the workers, create the jobs. We, the workers, create the wealth. AT&T gross profit for the quarter ending March 21st was $17.8 billion, a 4.89% increase year over year. Just in the last quarter, they made over $17 billion. $17 billion in a quarter. And you don't think they don't have enough money to safely remove these lead cables out of the water, the soil, and out of the air? They got it. They just don't want to do it because of their greed. Let's continue. So it says the lead in Lake Tahoe water sample was 2,533 times the EPA limit for drinking water. That one square is the EPA guideline. This is how much lead that was in the water in Lake Tahoe. That's how much lead was in the water, and they don't want to extract it safely to save lives. They don't care about us. Look at this. This is how much lead is in that water. And you think they actually care about us? Do you really think that these job creators actually care about us? All of that. And remember, this is what it does to people. Remember what it does to people. Parts of Lake Tahoe are used for drinking water. Some of us are too poor to get filters. Some of us may at times are too poor to get a refrigerator that has a water filtration system or has a home filtration system. Hell, some of us can't afford a Brita water filter to use in our own homes because we're just that broke. And then on top of it, even if we do buy water filters to drink, we're still taking showers in this water. We're still putting our little kids in the bathtubs with this water. It is so costly to be poor. Because somebody rich, they can have a complete water filtration system for their entire house and not ever have to worry about this at all. But those of us that are poor, we get this lead, we ingest it through our drinking water, through our cooking, right? We're also bathing in this water. We're washing our hair, we're brushing our teeth. And then guess what happens? We end up with health issues. And these health issues that we end up with even cost us even more. It is more expensive to be poor in this country than it is to be rich. You pay a tax just for being poor. And this is why. Because they want to keep more money in their pockets. Though any potential risk would be for swimmers ingesting the water near the cables. Compared with the EPA's guideline for water out the tap, the March tests in Emerald Bay were 367 times and 2,533 times the threshold, respectively. As AT&T hired environmental consulting firm Haley and Aldrich during the litigation to take samples in March 2021 at 5 locations in Lake Tahoe, 2 of them close to the cables. The test found quote-unquote very low levels of lead in the water, according to the report provided by AT&T to the Journal. The lake's water quality is not adversely impacted by the cables, the study said, adding that the cables were largely non-detect for lead, including those collected nearest the subject cables. So basically, AT&T hired their own and said, "Oh yeah, this not that." And of course they would do that, and of course they would do that to fudge the numbers, so that allegedly they would fudge the numbers, so that they wouldn't be able to, so they wouldn't be held liable. I smell a class action lawsuit. This is wild. In West Orange, New Jersey, a lead sheath cables sags over tree-lined sidewalks and driveways for more than 1/3 of a mile, where children and their parents walk across the street from Gregory Elementary School. The cable sometimes dips about 12 feet above ground. Here it is in Mississippi. Says lead and sediment was 19.8 times the EPA guide for where children can congregate. So it's near children's playgrounds. So this is what's going on in our country. They go over, this article actually goes over how they do the testing for lead. So this is actually pretty detailed. And this isn't limited to just red states or blue states. This isn't just limited to, the Midwest or the coastal states. This is all over the country. So this is what's happening.